This is Joe Rabil with Rabil Stock Research. So we're going to start out today with a lesson in RSI. I think a lot of people use this in ways where you can make some mistakes, all right? I know we're looking at it as an overbought, oversold oscillator. I want to show you a couple techniques that I think will help you avoid some of the mistakes you might be making. Then we're going to take a hard look at the market, go through some market indices, and then there were a lot of stock requests since I didn't do a video last week. I'm going to cover all of those today. All right, so let's go ahead and get going. Okay, let's look at the QQQ weekly chart. All right, and I'm going to show you what I've got, how I have this set up. So I've got the RSI 20 set up in red. That's the red line. Now they're on the same scale. We've still got a 30, 70, and a 50, a dotted 50 line going across for overbought, oversold, and then this kind of a neutral level, all right, for 20 and the RSI 5, which is in kind of like a little light blue there, maybe gray. So what we've done with this, instead of using an RSI 14, what we've done is sort of divided this up. All right, I'm using the RSI 20 as a trend indicator for the most part, okay? And then I'm using the RSI 5 as the overbought, oversold oscillator. All right, now what I see a lot of people doing is they're looking at an overbought, an oversold signal, let's say like this here. Let me just get this, clear this off, where RSI comes down under the 30 mark, we're officially oversold. All right, and they're treating that signal the same as they'd be treating this signal. We got oversold here below the 30 mark, same as this. But to me, there's a massive distinction in this because when we got oversold here, the RSI 20 was breaking below the 50 mark. All right, you see how that's the trend indicator. If we stay above the 50 mark, then we can use these dips underneath the 50 mark and down to the 30 mark as potential buying opportunities. All right. But when we get this kind of a sell-off to the downside that causes the RSI 20 to drop below the 50 mark, I would only, if I'm trading this to the upside, I know I have to be extremely nimble. More nimble than I would probably want to be because I know I'm kind of buying into a potential change in trend or a break of the trend. All right, now if we look at it from this standpoint, the RSI 20, it was so strong, the trend to the upside, that we went through an ABC correction here. The red, which is the RSI 20, actually held the 50 mark despite the fact that the RSI 5 got deeply oversold. All right, so we want to make sure we understand the difference between this oversold and this oversold. Once you do, you have a massive advantage over the average person using the RSI. All right, now once we know that the RSI 20 is actually below the 50 mark, now we can actually look for rallies in the RSI 5, right, above the 50 and above the 30 here as potential selling opportunities. All right, and now why do we want to do this? Why do we want to look at the 5 in relation to the 20 and how it's acting around the 50? What we're doing is we're adding an element of trend into our thinking. In other words, we're only playing in the direction of the trend. It's a massive advantage to be able to take an oversold reading, and we know we're playing it in the direction of the trend. That's what all of these were. These pullbacks were just simple pullbacks as a part of an ongoing trend. So every time we dipped down, we were basically getting an opportunity to take a look at it again. All right, now if you look at what took place here, we had this ABC and we got deeply oversold. So this is one of my favorite indications when RSI 20 is holding the 50 mark and RSI 5 gets deeply oversold. It doesn't happen all that often. It happened a few times in late 2023, early 2024, and even mid 2024. It doesn't happen that much, but it happened 3 times over the course of 6 months. Pretty rare event, all right? So we want to be aware of that, and I think we want to use this to our advantage when we get these readings. Just understand what they're telling us. So this kind of a drop is probably like, yeah, it might get a little bounce, and then we get deeper decline. So you'd have to be incredibly nimble to try and play those. All right, let's take a quick look at the IWM. Same sort of issue here, but if you notice, we've gotten we've been below, and it wasn't really able to hold the 50 mark the RSI 20 through pullbacks, it kind of just wasn't strong enough. All right. Now it did that through here, but then we get this drop. You see this big deep drop like this, and we know we're really oversold and we're coming into support. So is there a way to take advantage of these uber oversold? When we come back under 10, when the 5 RSI gets under 10, we know that we're getting a really, really deep reading. All right. And it's almost, I mean, we're probably within days of seeing, or at least weeks, if it's a weekly indicator, of seeing a pretty decent bounce off of this deep oversold. So what do we do in this situation? Because RSI 20 is telling us to stay away. What I would suggest if I want to play these, and I would only play I wouldn't play the ones that just get under the 30 mark this way. But if we get really, really deep readings, like we're seeing in these two here, what I would suggest is go down one more time frame. In fact, in this situation, I'd probably go down 2 time frames. All right. Now, what I've done is gone down to the hourly chart. All right. So I know I'm deeply oversold in April of 2014 on the weekly RSI 5 has gotten down to like 5 to 10. All right. It's really, really overdone. So what I'm looking for on this chart is a signal that suggests some kind of a reversal. Now, if you notice what happens, and when you get this type of a smaller time frame, I think you want to use the RSI 20. In my opinion, the RSI 20 is a great tool for divergences. All right, when you get divergences off an RSI 20, they tend to have more meaning, especially when you go into the smaller time frames like this. So if you notice what happened, we got this drop. Now this is into the drop on the weekly where we're way overdone and the RSI 20 is down at like 5 or 10. All right, and we make a move, we come down, we make a marginal new low, and look at how the RSI makes a higher bottom. Then we get a rally up, and then we make another higher low, and this is making a significantly higher bottom, right? So any of those signals, either off this low or off this low, as they're turning up, I think you could take as a divergence trade in the direction of the oversold reading that we have on the RSI weekly. All right, so we're combining this deep oversold reading, which you got basically 2 times. I mean, I would say this is pretty close. It got down to about 10. You could have used it on that as well. Also recognizing that we're into pretty massive support, right? We've got a huge support. We're deeply oversold. All right, we don't have a trend in place, but we have the potential for a pretty good rally inside the range. All right, so then we go down and we drop down to a small time frame. I would recommend, if I'm using this technique, to drop 2 time frames. All right, so if you get a deep oversold reading on a daily chart, you might be going down to like a 10-minute to get this kind of a divergence signal, maybe a 15-minute chart or something like that. Look for the first sign of divergence on the RSI 20 on the smaller time frame, and that should give you an edge to get you in at a pretty early level on this deep oversold reading. All right. Now, I would say that I like these signals better off of the bottoms than I would off the top. Sometimes the tops take a little bit more time to develop. Bottoms, when there's panic involved, we can get pretty quick reversal. So that's how I would play this. Definitely worth looking into. If you're enjoying the content, hit that like button and also subscribe. So my services can be found at rabelstockresearch.com. I'm on this page right now. You can see at the top, I've got my advanced trend and momentum courses. There's 3 different courses now. I've individually priced them, or you can buy them as a bundle, and they are lifetime access now. So I changed that. It's not year to year. Okay. And then we have the individual package. I have about 2 to 3 reports each week, plus a special video, weekly video for that package that covers a lot of details into what I'm seeing for the week. So if you have an interest, go ahead and take a look. Also, the book is on the book tab. You can go if this is a good place to start if you're new to my methodology. My comments are for educational purposes only. Please do your own research before you make any investment decisions. All right. Now, let's start out with the QQQ. We're kind of in this same mode here where the market continues to push higher. If I look at the weekly chart, in fact, let me just make sure everyone sees this. We've got a monthly chart in the bottom left, weekly chart in the bottom right. I've got a daily chart in the upper right. In the upper middle is a 60-minute chart, and then in the upper left is the weekly chart with the zigzag and the relative strength and the RSI we just talked about. All right, I like to look at the RSI on a weekly basis. It really helps with respect to the trend, and it can be used very well in conjunction with the 18-month line. All right, let's just look at what's taken place. So you can see what's happening on this weekly chart. You can really see, just looking at it from a distance, right, instead of zooming in, we get this kind of bird's eye view. You see how it's just drifting higher? We're not getting the type of signal where you consolidate and then monster breakout and then consolidate and then bronze, extend, breakout and extend. It's just an upward drift, all right? But there's just no sellers. We're not getting any sellers. The sellers peaked on this day here on this bar, and it has been dropping ever since. You see how there's just no selling? Now, the buyers have come and gone a little bit, but they're trending to the upside. But most important to me is the sellers. There's just not any real selling taking place. We're going to need this line to turn to the upside before we can expect any kind of reversal. Now, what I'm sort of expecting when I see this type of pattern is we break out and we get a little bit of a chop here, consolidation, minor pullback, but nothing all that severe. What it does is it allows the bigger moving averages to catch up and lets this sort of set up and works off the overbought condition that we have, let me just show you, on the RSI 5. You see how overbought we are? There's no divergence here. I mean, we start over with this big move. We start over and you can see we're making a new high in the RSI 20, new high in the RSI 5. What we're looking for is this RSI 5 to drop down under the 50 mark and the RSI 20 to hold above the 50 mark. Okay, and then we'll get another one of these RSI buy signals is what I'd like to call, and it would probably be above the 18-week. So that's what I would be looking for. It's kind of what I'd be anticipating. We're not really seeing any major signs of momentum loss yet on the daily chart. We are starting to see a little bit on the hourly. If you notice on the hourly, we went to a new high here. We had a little gap up, and the ADX did not get above the 50 mark. So it's a little bit anticipatory when you're looking at it on an hourly. I mean, hourly can jump around a lot, but we have kind of our first sign. It's always going to show up on the small time frame first. I'm still watching to see. We're looking for a break of this 18-day because 18-day turned up. We kind of came close to testing it, but then we tested it again. Until we break this line, we have to consider the current trend to the upside. All right, let's go ahead and look at IWM. We've got really what we have is an index that is trying to play catch up. It's not a leader. You can see on an RS basis, this moving average is the 30 MA of the relative strength versus the S&P. As long as that's declining, this index is underperforming. We really want to see, for everybody's sake, if anybody who wants to trade stocks or be invested in the market, if we can get these lines to turn up on a relative basis and we see improvement on a relative basis, you're going to see a massive amount of expansion in the number of stocks participating and overall conditions of the market improve. So that's why on a weekly basis we take a hard look at this. We have not reached that level yet, but we could see that happen if we can see a higher low form and maybe reverse the trend structure that's taking place here. All right, let's look at SOL versus to the dollar. So a lot of these cryptos are, I think, Bitcoin is the strongest for the most part, but I wanted to point this out. I got this question about this one. So notice how important the 200 mark is on this. All right, it's a very pivotal area. We kind of topped out there. We failed at it there. We did get around it here, right? And then we tried to get above it, tried to get to it there, didn't quite make it, but then we just turned again and failed at it. We need a convincing move, closing bar through this. Not a little, poke, just barely get above. I mean, if this had a green bar follow through here, then we're really getting through. Kind of like what happened here, and that led to a little bit more upside. But I would say I would just have a hard time getting overly bullish with this no matter what's taking place below this 200 mark at this point, especially with MACD just rallying to the zero line, and we don't show any strength yet on this on this time frame on the weekly. All right, so I don't think I'd be playing this pullback below the 200 mark, because I don't think there's enough room for it to make sense on a risk reward basis. All right, let's look at BBAI. Now, interesting enough, because I didn't do the show last week, I emailed the person who asked about this and just told them how I felt like there was resistance up here. You can see all this resistance from, basically 8.5 up to 10. I think I maybe defined it as 9 to 10 or something like that. Well, he took a swing trade and he got out before, up at this area is what he emailed me back. So that's really good trading, taking advantage of the pullback, getting in, probably taking advantage of using a smaller time frame to enter, move your way up, and then as you approach this resistance area that looks a little ominous when you look at it on the weekly or the monthly, kind of take your profits and move on. Nothing wrong with that. I think that's the way I would be looking at this until this consolidates a little bit more, maybe a little bit closer down, and holds this area in the low 5s or 6 or something like that. Then I'd start to feel a little bit better that maybe we're working through this resistance some. All right, look at BABA. So we want to zoom out first and see what's really going on here. You see how this has been massive decline, and then we went through this long sideways period. Now, the 18-month does a great job of defining this. You see how long down, and then we start to flatten out, and this went sideways, and now look what's happening. This is actually turning up. Now, the question becomes, can this hold again? It held on this pullback, which was really encouraging because the MACD was also holding the signal line, right? And now we're getting another pullback. I kind of like the way this looks myself. All right, green DI on the monthly starting to kind of perk up a little bit, some volume improvement. Now, if you notice what's taking place on the weekly chart, we formed an ABC kind of consolidation in the form of like a wedge pattern. All right, so I kind of want to see this emerge out of here. Love to see a big green bar up through 125 or something like that. Certainly on a daily chart, we're going to need to make another higher low to be convincing. But I would be watching this. We've got a zero line reversal. We have low ADX. The volume that went in on the way up was good. And we had one bad volume bar. But other than that, really has been a pretty orderly consolidation pattern. So definitely one you can keep on your watch list and keep a close eye on that daily chart. CCJ, I think, is just too extended at this point. We've made a run after the low ADX. We got to break out and follow through. So now what I'm looking for, maybe earnings will help with this tomorrow. We get a consolidation or correction off of the daily that creates what I call an ABC or opposing trend pattern, where this is going in the opposite direction of this. So if this trend is up, and this trend would actually look like it's going down, but it's actually what it's doing is offering us an opportunity to buy weakness. All right, so that's what we're looking for. This is obviously, I go through this in my book as well as my courses, in depth, understanding how to play this 2 time frame setup, where you get a pullback on your larger time frame, which is up, and then this time frame forms an opposing trend. All right, momentum signs are all good here. We want to play a pullback. Citigroup has been pretty amazing, even relative to the banks. It's had a really good run recently and extended its breakout. This is a huge breakout. Look at how many years this has been consolidating. We're breaking out. Now, how do we handle this? Well, we've gotten a little too much of a run in the short term. We're going to need to play a pullback exactly the way I described on the last one. We need this to come back and form some kind of an ABC, which will allow this to correct down closer to the 18-week. We want this to get closer to the 18-week and work off the overbought here, and then we can look at a reversal pattern on this time frame to get in on the weekly turn and this big base that's formed on the monthly chart. Okay, ZENA. Consolidating. Now, it has dipped down the last couple days, maybe a little bit more than we'd like to see, but when I look at it on the weekly, nothing's really changed. I think we're going to want to see this turn up pretty soon, though. My one concern is that if this goes on a little too long, the 18-day is going to roll, and if that rolls, then this whole process is going to take more time, and potentially you could have more risk working its way back down here. So if we're going to get a signal, we're going to need one to take place, I think, pretty soon before this 18-day turns down. Now, what's bothering me is that we've got this MACD turning down below the signal line. So typically what that means is that we're going to get a move up and then we'll come back down and we'll do some kind of a zigzag pattern like this if it's going to work. So that's what I would be. I wouldn't be in a big hurry to play the first up move in this now. I'd probably be looking for something that takes a little bit more time. Gen Digital, yeah, I know we're looking at this monster breakout pattern potentially. What I'd be looking for is some form of a breakout or improvement on an ADX basis on this time frame. Otherwise, I kind of need to wait for this to break out above all these highs here, you know, up above the 34 level or something like that. I'd like to buy the breakout above these highs. Okay, now if I'm going to do that, I need to see some improvement on a momentum basis on the lower time frames. I at least need to see a big monster green bar with volume. Okay, if I get that, then I'd probably feel okay about buying this breakout and not waiting for this one to take care. I'd hate to have to pay up for this and get it when it's almost extended. All right, so we really want to play this breakout, but we're going to need some signs that we've got something a little bit more legitimate taking place in the short term, and that means improved momentum. All right. LFMA, a little sloppy. I don't have a whole lot of history here in terms of, so yeah, we got a little move up. We failed at the 40, back down. I just think, look at the volume pattern, a lot of resistance at 5, and that caused a really steep reversal. So I'm not a huge fan of the way this is playing out. I think there's just too much resistance up there. Probably need to see this get back above above 3 before we'd have any interest in this at all. Thanks for tuning in. If you have any stock requests, you can send them to stocktalk@stockcharts.com or just put them in the comment area below. Also, if you want to learn some more about some of these techniques, you can go to my YouTube channel. All right, have a great week, and we'll see you next time.